Tricell's origins stretch back to the windswept ports of the 18th century, when a shrewd merchant named Thomas Travis carved his name into the roaring heart of the age of exploration. Driven by ambition and opportunity, he founded a modest trading company that sailed the world's oceans, its sails billowing to the promise of fortune. As the world turned and the 19th century dawned, the Travis legacy passed into the hands of his great-grandson, Henry Travis. Unlike his ancestor, Henry was not content with mere commerce. He was stirred by tales of uncharted lands and the exploits of adventurers like Sir David Livingstone. Eager to leave his own mark on history, Henry financed a daring expedition deep into the African continent. What he discovered there would not only reshape his understanding of the world, it would set in motion events that would transform a simple trading firm into something far greater and far more dangerous. Henry Travis would return to the African continent not just once, but 5 times over the course of his life. For 34 years, he traversed the rivers, jungles, and sun-scorched plains of West Africa, immersing himself in the lives and traditions of many people he encountered. With the eyes of both an explorer and a scholar, he documented everything, from tribal customs to the region's unique geology and vibrant ecosystems, filling 72 volumes of handwritten notes, sketches, and maps. He called it Natural History Conspectus, a monumental work he believed would cement his place among the great explorers of his age. But the world he returned to had changed, or perhaps it never truly cared. Upon his arrival back in Europe, Henry was not met with acclaim, but with skepticism. The scientific community dismissed his life work as fanciful, accusing him of embellishment and romanticism. Only a handful of copies were ever printed, and most gathered dust in forgotten archives. Behind the scenes, the betrayal cut even deeper. It was said that his own elder brother, the man who now ran Travis' trading firm, had quietly undermined Henry's credibility by casting doubt on the explorer's claims. The elder Travis ensured that the company's investors remained the sole believers in the untapped riches Henry had described. The disillusionment broke Henry. The dream of becoming a hero like Livingstone, a name sung in the same breath as pioneers he idolized, crumbled into silence. Within 2 years of his return, Henry Travis died in obscurity, his heart heavy with disappointment. His name would fade from public memory, but his discoveries and the secrets he uncovered would live on in the dark corners of the Travis legacy, waiting for the right moment to re-emerge. As the 19th century drew to a close, the Travis trading firm stood at a crossroads, one shaped not by commerce alone, but by the legacy of a man the world had chosen to forget. Though Henry Travis had died in obscurity, the knowledge he had gathered during his years in Africa had not been lost. Hidden within the pages of his neglected natural history conspectus were maps, mineral surveys, and the insights into the continent's untapped wealth. Quietly, his brother and the company he had led began to act on that information. Armed with Henry's data, the firm launched its first major expansion. They returned to the lands he once roamed, not as explorers, but as industrialists. Mines were carved into the earth in search of gold, oil, and natural gas, and the firm quickly gained a foothold in Africa's resource extraction economy. But the ventures didn't end with minerals. While scouring the land for profit, company agents began collecting samples of local flora and fauna. At first, they supplied exotic curiosities to European naturalists. Yet among these strange specimens was plants with remarkable medicinal properties, and whispers of their potential value began to circulate in company reports. What had begun as a trading and mining venture soon evolved once more. By the mid-20th century, this quiet discovery had given rise to a new branch of the firm, a third cell, that would become the cornerstone of its future. With this, the Travis company had transformed into something far greater than its founders could have envisioned. What had once been a humble trading house now stood as a global force, one rooted in trade, industry, and science. And at its heart, whether acknowledged or not, remained the shadow of Henry Travis and the wild truths he had brought back from Africa. By the 1960s, the Travis firm had grown far beyond its mercantile origins. What began as a family-run trading company had evolved into a vast enterprise with 3 distinct branches: natural resource extraction, global shipping and logistics, and an increasingly profitable pharmaceutical division. Each sector had grown independently, yet together they formed the lifeblood of the company's global reach. It was during this decade of change that a bold rebranding was undertaken, one that reflected the company's transformation and ambitions. The firm officially unified its operations under a single, symbolic name: Tricell. Each cell represented one of its 3 core industries, tied together by a common corporate vision that emphasized adaptability, expansion, and control. The name was more than a brand, it was a philosophy, a reflection of the company's structure and the ability to thrive in any environment. Much like the biological systems it had begun to study, from trade routes charted by Thomas Travis, to the forgotten expeditions of Henry Travis, to the laboratories now breeding experimental compounds, Tricell stood on the culmination of centuries of ambition. Behind closed doors, however, its interests were beginning to turn towards darker, more secretive pursuits, ones that would eventually draw the attention of governments, watchdogs, and those who knew the true cost of unchecked discovery. In the wake of the Raccoon City destruction incident, the world turned its eyes on the shadow cast by corporate ambition. The truth emerged like a sickness. Umbrella Corporation, once a titan of the pharmaceutical world, had been the architect of the outbreak, having secretly developed and deployed biological weapons beneath the veil of medical research. As the horrifying revelations unfolded, the fallout rippled across the entire pharmaceutical industry. The Federation of Pharmaceutical Companies, a global coalition of medical enterprises, was thrown into disgrace. Tricell, whose pharmaceutical division was a long-standing member of the FPC, suddenly found itself under a cloud of suspicion. Public trust in the entire organization crumbled, especially once it revealed that Umbrella had used its fellow member corporations not just for collaboration, but as unwitting suppliers of critical chemical compounds for its biological weapons programs. When investigations mounting and the specter of prosecution looming, the FPC scrambled to protect itself. Tricell, ever shrewd and pragmatic, quickly aligned with the shifting winds. Alongside other Federation members, it voluntarily handed over internal documents detailing past dealings with Umbrella, documents that would prove instrumental in the prosecution of Umbrella executives. In exchange, Tricell and its peers secured a quiet assurance they would not be investigated further. When Umbrella ultimately fell in the Raccoon trials, the FPC began the long and difficult road to redemption. As part of its rehabilitation effort, it established the Bioterrorism Security Assessment Alliance, the BSAA, a paramilitary organization dedicated to preventing future bioterror incidents and combating rogue BOWs across the world. Tricell, seizing the opportunity to reshape its image, became one of the BSAA's earliest and most generous financial backers. Publicly, the company pledged to be part of the solution, vowing to help repair what Umbrella had broken. But behind the polished statements and charitable gestures, Tricell's interest in bioterrorism was far from over. For them, the fall of Umbrella was not an ending, it was an opening to a new frontier. So Tricell had positioned itself as a benevolent force in the wake of Umbrella's collapse, supporting the BSAA and pledging transparency. The true ambitions ran far deeper and darker. Beneath the surface, the company harbored an insatiable interest in the potential of bioorganic weapons. Soon after the BSAA's formation, Tricell's pharmaceutical division took a covert turn, secretly aiding in the development of a new viral strain, the T-Abyss virus, designed for high transmissibility in aquatic environments. It was initially intended to study, but Tricell had no intention of leaving such power unclaimed. During the Queen Zenobia incident, Tricell's operatives embedded deep within both the BSAA and the now defunct Federal Bioterrorism Commission ensured that the virus would fall into the company's hands. Through the covert efforts of Jessica Sherawat, a double agent within the BSAA, and Raymond Wesker, an FBC turncoat, a sample of the virus was successfully extracted and returned to Tricell's hidden labs. In the shadows of the Penamstan Civil War, Tricell formed a secret alliance with Major General Wilson, a disgraced U.S. military officer with grand visions of engineer superiority. Together they began to work on a project to create super soldiers using a modified strain of the T-virus, the resurrection of Umbrella's original nightmare. The war-torn region became their testing ground. The first field test was a disaster. The virus spread unpredictably among the deployed soldiers, but even failure held value for Tricell. They soon discovered that the elite unit known as Mad Dogs had been infected, yet retained some form of their mind. Seizing the opportunity, Tricell began administering an experimental drug regimen, one that suppressed the viral symptoms and mutation. Provided it was taken regularly, the Mad Dogs became unwilling test subjects, a walking case study in controlled infection. Years later, as Wilson ascended to the powerful position of Secretary of Defense under President Graham's administration, only Jason, the Mad Dog's commander, remained alive. The rest of his unit had taken their own lives, unable to endure the psychological toll of fighting off the monster within. But secrets have a way of surfacing. When Wilson attempted to manipulate global events by framing China for a bioterror attack, his web of lies unraveled. Jason, now grotesquely mutated and seeking to expose the truth, turned on his former handler. In the aftermath, Wilson, infected and desperate, went into hiding, clinging to life only through Tricell's virus-suppressing drug. Tricell's grip on bioterrorism had tightened in silence. Where Umbrella had failed with brute force and arrogance, Tricell has succeeded through patience, subterfuge, and manipulation. Their influence now stretched from battlefields to boardrooms, from labs to the highest levels of government. And the world once again remained largely unaware of a monster growing behind the mask. As the 21st century marched forward, the bioterrorism landscape grew increasingly volatile, and Tricell thrived in chaos. When the WP Corporation, a once respected pharmaceutical giant, crumbled under the weight of a scandal, Tricell was watching. The fall came swiftly. It was revealed that WP's lead researcher, Frederick Downing, had secretly brokered deals with known bioterrorism groups, selling samples of the T virus in anticipation of profiting from the inevitable global demand for the T vaccine. The world reeled in shock, but for Tricell, it was a golden opportunity. With cold precision, Tricell moved in, acquiring the shattered remnants of the WP Corporation under the guise of cleanup and restructuring. But beneath the surface, their motives ran far deeper. Among the ruins of WP's infamous Air Dome laboratory, Tricell's hazmat recovery teams unearthed something extraordinary and disturbing. Half buried beneath the wreckage of what was appeared to be a severed tail, mutated and grotesque, forensic scans suggested a horrifying possibility. It belonged to Curtis Miller, the G-virus-infected terrorist involved in the Harvardville airport incident. It was a biological anomaly too valuable to ignore, and Tricell secured it in secrecy, eager to extract whatever secrets the sample could offer. During their deep dive into WP's internal files, Tricell uncovered a dangerous trail leading to U.S. Senator Ron Davis, a man who had used his influence to shield Downing's activities in exchange for political favors. Davis had become a liability. Tricell responded without hesitation. Their operatives hacked into the senator's private systems, extracting old relevant data, and then erased every trace of their intrusion. Days later, Davis was found dead under suspicious circumstances, officially ruled a heart attack. But those in certain circles knew better. Tricell had tied up one loose end. With the acquisition of WP's assets, the G-virus specimen secured, and another threat buried in silence, Tricell's quiet conquest of the bioweapons world continued. They were no longer merely a successor to Umbrella. They were something more cunning, more ruthless, and far more dangerous. Albert Wesker had always been a man of vision, cold, calculating, and driven by an unrelenting hunger for power. To him, Umbrella was never a sanctuary, only a stepping stone. Even as he rose through the ranks, he was quietly orchestrating his downfall, feeding his secrets to a rival benefactor who had promised him the freedom to pursue his ambitions. In 2003, as an Umbrella clung to his final bastion in the frozen wastes of the Caucasus, Wesker struck the killing blow. Under the cover of chaos, he infiltrated the stronghold, an icy fortress built to outlast the world's scorn, and tore through its security. What he stole that day was not gold or weaponry, but something far more dangerous: Umbrella's entire research archive. Decades of viral data, experimental breakthroughs in the darkest corners of bioweapon science, now in his possession. Umbrella's collapse was now complete, and from its ashes, Wesker plotted to build something far more greater. With his sights set on reshaping the world through viral evolution, Wesker knew he could not act alone. Not yet. And so, not long after the Caucasus raid, he reached out to an emerging power player in the biotech world, Tricell. To the world, Tricell remained a public ally in the fight against bioterrorism. But in the shadows, it became Wesker's quiet partner. In exchange for access to his stolen Umbrella research, Tricell offered funding, resources, and the cover he needed to continue his work, unchecked and unnoticed. Thus began a dangerous partnership, one between a corporation cloaked in legitimacy and a man who dreamed not of controlling the world as it was, but remaking it entirely. And together they would push the boundaries of science and morality, beyond anything humanity had ever seen. Albert Wesker's partnership with Tricell was built on ambition and mutual benefit. In exchange for the considerable capital and logistical support, Wesker handed over two of the most coveted viral strains in existence, the Tyre virus and the T. veronica virus. These samples, remnants of Umbrella's most dangerous experiments, were entrusted to Tricell's secret laboratories, where research continued behind layers of security and lies. For Wesker, the deal was transactional. With Umbrella in ruins, he had no loyalty left, only the vision of something greater. Tricell's wealth merely fueled his next phase, allowing him to grow the vast reservoir of data, technology, and vital assets he had salvaged from the corpse of his former employer. He was no longer the servant of Umbrella, he was its successor. But fate had one final ghost to show him. In a hidden manner far from the public eye, Wesker came face to face with Oswald E. Spencer, Umbrella's reclusive and long-exiled founder. A shell of the man he once was, Spencer revealed the truth long buried. Wesker's very existence had been engineered. He was one of many children molded underneath the Wesker Project, a twisted experiment meant to birth a new breed of superior humans, beings worthy to inherit Spencer's vision of a purified world. It was a revelation that changed everything. But others might have crumbled under the weight of such truth. Wesker saw clarity. Spencer had failed, not in the vision, but in the execution. The old man had become a relic, clinging to the dreams he had no longer the strength to realize. And so, without hesitation, Wesker killed him. The world corrupted by weakness and chaos could no longer be allowed to exist in its current state. Evolution would not be left to chance, it would be imposed. Wesker no longer sought to rebuild Umbrella, he sought to reshape the world itself, to burn away its decay and replace it with something new, something worthy. Tricell remained his closest ally in that vision. With their resources and global reach, his amassed knowledge and viral arsenal, Wesker continued his work from the shadows. No longer a pawn of past empires, he now saw himself as a god in the making, one who would not merely inherit the world, but remake it in his image. In the shadow corridors of Tricell's rising power, two ambitious figures found one another. Albert Wesker and Excella Ginoni. Their first meeting was one of mutual recognition. Two intellects sharpened by vision and unburdened by morality, each seeking to reshape the world in their image. Over private discussions and clandestine meetings, they exchanged their ideas, visions of the world freed from weakness, governed not by politics or wealth, but by genetic superiority. A rising star within Tricell's ranks hungered for more than science. She craved power, absolute, untouchable power, and Wesker saw in her the ruthless drive that mirrored his own. He encouraged her ambition, urging her to seize control of Tricell Inc., Africa, and turn the pharmaceutical giant's African division into the staging ground for their shared vision. But such power did not come freely. Suspicion and resistance simmered among Tricell's senior leadership. Excella would have to prove the value of the radical plan she and Wesker proposed, and Wesker had just the answer. From deep within Umbrella's stolen archives, he presented a sample of the Las Plagas parasite, a horrifying organism once buried beneath a Spanish castle, capable of fusing itself with human hosts and reshaping their will. With the help of Tricell's own underground researcher, Ricardo Irving, Wesker perfected the strain, birthing the more obedient and controllable Type 2 and 3. The tests were brutal but successful, and the results undeniable. The parasite could create obedient soldiers, enhance physical capabilities, and eliminate the need for traditional military hierarchies. The demonstration silenced all doubt. Excel's position as CEO of Tricell's African division was secured. From her newly fortified seat of power, she and Wesker began the greatest and most dangerous endeavor yet, the development of the Uroboros virus. Engineered from the ancient and deadly progenitor virus, Uroboros was meant to be the final step in Wesker's vision, a pathogen that would cleanse humanity, preserving only those strong enough to survive its brutal evolutionary crucible. Together, Wesker and Excella oversaw its creation in secrecy, deep within Tricell's African laboratories. To the outside world, they were business elites navigating a post-Umbrella world. But behind locked doors, they were architects of extinction, forging a weapon not to destroy nations, but to remake the species. With the vast archives of Umbrella and the personal records of Oswald E. Spencer now at his fingertips, Albert Wesker became a living repository of humanity's darkest scientific ambitions. Among the buried secrets, he uncovered the location of Umbrella's most classified and forgotten sites. The Umbrella African Research Center, the very birthplace of the progenitor virus. Wesker wasted no time, backed by Tricell's immense resources and protected by Excella's new authority as CEO of Tricell Africa. he spearheaded the reactivation of the facility. The remote jungle became ground zero for the ultimate creation, the Uroboros virus. Within the facility's ancient halls and modernized labs, the virus was cultivated. Designed not to simply infect, but to judge. Only the strong would survive its embrace. The rest would be consumed in a massive breeding in human biomass. Tricell's operations remained hidden until the BSAA caught wind of the unsettling activity in the region. A team was dispatched, led by Chris Redfield and his new partner, Shiva Almar. As they followed the trail of bioorganic weapons and disappearances, they uncovered the full horror unfolding beneath the surface. Ricardo Irving, the crooked researcher responsible for distributing the modified plagas, was confronted and defeated. Jill was rescued from Wesker's control, freed from the neural device that had bound her mind and body to his will. But it was Wesker himself who stood at the heart of the storm, his vision now fully revealed. Excella, believing she was to share in Wesker's new world, was blindsided by betrayal. Wesker dismissed her with chilling clarity. She had never been his partner, only a tool. He did not seek to be a king in some new order. He saw himself as a god, the final judge of who was to be worthy to inherit the earth. To him, Excella had served her purpose. She was consumed by the very virus they had created. But Wesker's twisted dream would never be realized. In a brutal showdown deep within the bowels of the facility, Chris and Shiva faced a god-aspiring tyrant, mutated by his own virus and driven by megalomania. Wesker fought with inhuman strength and fury, but even he was not invincible. In a final explosive confrontation aboard a volcano-ridden battlefield, the two BSAA agents defeated him, launching missiles into his infected form and reducing both Wesker and Uroboros to ash and molten ruin. Tricell's African ambitions were crushed. The facility fell, and with it, the last remnants of Umbrella's terrible legacy, or so the world believed. But in the shadows of global recovery and renewed vigilance, the seeds planted by Wesker and Tricell would continue to bear bitter fruit for years to come. The fall of Albert Wesker marked the collapse of more than just one man. It marked the beginning of the end for Tricell. In the aftermath of the Uroboros incident, the world's attention turned to the company that enabled Wesker's plans. A wave of damning revelations came, unearthing a web of human rights violations, secret experimentation, and deep-rooted involvement in the bioterrorism black market, all orchestrated by Tricell's pharmaceutical division and its covert research branches. The BSAA's investigation uncovered mounds of evidence, viral samples, modified parasites, records of illegal human trials, and even links to weaponized bioorganic creatures deployed across multiple conflict zones. Public outrage was swift. Governments distanced themselves. Investors vanished. Tricell, once seen as legitimate successor to Umbrella's Void, was universally condemned. By 2011, whispers of a new viral threat began to circulate in the political corridors of Washington, D.C., with subtle mentions of Tricell buried in intelligence reports. The rumors reached Neil Fisher, a senior member of the human rights organization TerraSave, who had long watched the pharmaceutical industry with suspicion. Troubled, he brought his concerns to Claire Redfield, one of TerraSave's most respected voices and a veteran of Raccoon City's tragedy. Claire, calm but resolute, dismissed the threat. "Tricell's gone, Neil," she said. "The BSAA made sure of it. There's nothing left to worry about." But even as she reassured him, the legacy of Tricell was not yet finished. Far from the public eye, on a remote and desolate island, another chapter of Wesker's nightmare was unfolding. Barry Burton, a seasoned BSAA agent and a longtime ally of Claire, found himself investigating strange reports of BOW activity. What he uncovered was chilling. Bioweapons bred from the same Uroboros strain that had nearly ended the world, only this time refined and repurposed by a new master. The mastermind was Alex Wesker, the sister of Albert in name and ideology. Using the research born from Tricell's experiments and her own twisted vision, she had conducted gruesome tests on the island's inhabitants, pushing Uroboros further into the realm of psychological and physical torment. Though Tricell had fallen, its sins had taken root elsewhere, in hidden labs, in the minds of rogue researchers, and the ambitions of those who still believed in controlling evolution through viral power. Tricell may have vanished from the corporate world, but his legacy remained a ghost, haunting those who survived and reshaping the horrors yet to come.